And we were skimming across those crests. It was just glorious. I looked like an absolute hero, and it was completely the boat.
In your mind,
yeah,
everybody else was thinking, what is that lunatic doing?
They all doing like 14 knots and smashing themselves to bits in the trough, so we were scooting along at 45. Welcome to episode 7 of Boat Nuts, the podcast all about boats. It's brought to you by Boat Nut number 1, Hugo and Dre, editor of Motorboat and Yachting magazine, and Boat Nut 2, that's me, Alex Smith, deputy editor. So Hugo, where are we today?
We are down at Ocean Village Marina in Southampton, and we have a very special boat to film on today. Behind me here is the Fairline Squadron 58. Particular personal favourite of mine. I love the way it looks, and it has so many cool features. You could probably see a few of them here. We've got a terrace folded down. We've got one of those each side. We've got this lovely glass transom. We've got lots of neat detailing, those little rocket launchers up there. £2.6 million worth of boat, but a very, very classy one. Now, this particular one belongs to Approved Boats, and it is for sale, I think, at £2.6 million ex VAT. A lot of money, but a lot of boat.
Yeah, it feels pretty special, doesn't it?
Does, love it.
As does our boat of the week, which is going to be the Omikron OT60. Hails from Greece, kind of takes a sailboat sort of ethos, but with the practicality of powerboat underpinning. So a really interesting boat, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I had a good look around it myself, but you've actually been out and tested it, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Went out to Athens, had a lovely time with the guys out there, visited the factory, so I know a fair bit about that boat. I'm pretty comfortable with it and pretty impressed by it, I have to say.
Looking forward to it.
What's next? Our product of the month.
Absolutely.
What is that?
That is paddleboards.
Paddleboards, exactly. How could I forget? I paddleboard a fair bit myself. I've got one.
Me
but
too.
There's loads of variety, so plenty to speak about. And it's just a really affordable way to get out on the water, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I rarely see a boat these days without at least one inflatable paddleboard on it. Nearly everybody has one.
But just so we can kickstart an argument, because we seem pretty much in accord with most of this so far, we're going to talk about inboard versus outboard power. And here's a man with an outboard powered boat.
Yep, so I'm going to have to stand up for that and justify my choice.
Even if you're wrong. So let's jump on board and disagree about that right now, shall we?
We will, let's do it.
Cool. Right then, let's get straight into the boat of the month, and that is the Omikron OT60, a boat which actually, Hugo, you saw first, didn't you, before me?
I saw it, I static at the, I think it was Dusseldorf Boat Show. Must have been 2024, I guess. But really unusual, interesting boat. Very different. Don't think I've seen anything quite like it before.
No, indeed. No, we've already kind of suggested the basis of it. It certainly looks as the aesthetic of a sailboat, doesn't it? And it would do, because it comes from Olympic Marine, who have kind of quite a distinguished history in custom-built racing yachts. But as I've also suggested, the principle there is that they want to generate a boat that delivers the serenity and the peace of the sailboat experience, a cruising sailboat, but at the same time bringing the practical underpinnings of a power-driven vessel. And the OT60, their first boat from the new brand Omikron, is their solution to exactly that. Now, when I first saw that, I went to Athens to take a look. On the basis of what you saw in Dusseldorf, you saw a lot of merit in that sort of concept. And I looked at that, and my first impression was, well, you know, it's been winning a lot of awards, so I'll reserve judgment. But in terms of the aesthetic, I looked at it, I didn't like it a lot, I've got to say.
Just because it looked like a sailing boat, or?
Yeah, partly. I mean, you got that big extended bowsprit, you got the fine entry, and then it's sort of, you know, that heavily tapered bow, and then it broadens at the aft end, and you've got that kind of open transom. Yeah, it's a big old beam on it. Well, what is the beam, incidentally?
I think it's probably, I believe it's 20 foot, which on a 60-foot boat, I mean, that's very nearly as wide as some power catamarans.
It's very
And you don't really see it in the photographs because it's sort of flares out quite gently.
Yeah.
And it looks, as you say, pretty much like a sailing boat without a mast. But when you get on it, you suddenly realise just how big 20 foot is on a boat of that size.
Yeah, there's a lot of volume to that boat, but it's not just about volume. It's about the way they've used it on this particular platform, as you identified in Dusseldorf. But before you even get to the internal stuff, which is a lot of fun, you've got the way they've organised the decks. So you've got a relatively short superstructure, given the 60 foot length.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And a very substantial amount of that length dedicated to the aft cockpit. And in that aft cockpit, you've got a nice single level deck. You've got a couple of L-shaped seating units facing one another across the way, and that's very sociable. Lots of space for freestanding furniture, and then just an open transom, very sailboat in that regard.
Huge aft platform. I think on Dusseldorf they were displaying it with sort of bean bags and so on.
Exactly that. And they supplemented that with a really peculiar design of passerelle. You and I were discussing this before. I haven't seen it on a previous boat.
No, I don't think I have.
either. So instead of the passerelle extending out telescopically from the back end of the boat, it sits flush with the cockpit, extending the cockpit deck, and swings out like that. So you can apparently launch and retrieve your tender with it, a tender of quite some size. Let me just check. I was going to say, 4.2 meters. So it's a proper size of tender that.
Yeah.
You can also use it as a dive platform when you're out in the water. And when you do that, of course, it opens up that lower swim platform because it's no longer limited in terms of vertical height for your bean bags and your water sports and so on. And if you're moored beam two, as we were in Athens, you can swing it past the fore and aft position onto the pontoon and use it in that way. So it's a very substantial.
Quite clever. So rather than having it tucked away, you actually make use of that extra width to extend the length of your bathing platform.
Yeah, very, very cleverly done. I was impressed with that. And I was also impressed with the fact that these moulded seating units, they seem to kind of float. You know, we've seen this before. You probably got evidence of it on this boat itself. Plenty of them. You kind of undercut the mouldings in order to give you a sense that the cushions are sort of
I see. So not literally floating in the water. It just looks like there's
it looks like
feet underneath
exactly
that. Because they're slightly lifted.
And it takes away a sense of the bulk a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which they want to do.
Gives you a bit more foot room, and visually it just looks less bulky, doesn't it?
It does. It looks cool. And they've done the same with a barbecue on the starboard quarter, where it's just kind of attached to the rails there, like a tray, and appears to just basically hover. So it feels very light-footed.
And it's light, isn't it? They've deliberately built it light.
They have. What is the weight of it? You're testing me again. Well, 20 tons.
Yeah.
20 tons.
Not much for a big boat of that volume when you give them the length and that beam.
Exactly that. And you know, the reason for all of this is, of course, a displacement boat. What they want to do is to generate that sailboat experience, as I say, to make it feel quite eco-friendly and light-footed, to give you that serene cruise, that quiet,
and
that
it's very
refinement.
small engines for a 60-footer, isn't
exactly.
it?
And you're not going to achieve all of that if you need to use big engines. Yeah. So we've got, I think, a couple of options, either 150s or 250s, pair of diesels. And, you know, they're essentially the same block. It's the Yanmar 2.8 litre 4-cylinder diesel. So you might as well go with the 250s. It's the same weight, as I say. Similar fuel flow, I'm told, but just an extra couple of knots at the top end. So frankly, why wouldn't you? And in terms of the rest of the external deck, well, you work your way around these side decks. It's symmetrical, so you've got nice wide side decks on both sides. And you get to a bow and think, well, there's not a tremendous amount going on here. You know, you've got your little
Well, that's where it does
deck.
taper and become much narrower, isn't it? You've got 20-foot beam at the back, but at the front, it's much more like a quite pointy sailboat.
Yeah, very tapered as a displacement boat has to be. But you've also got a ladder there at the bow, at the front edge of the superstructure, up the screen and onto the roof structure itself, which is an interesting solution. You know, they've got cushions up there, big enough for maybe 4 people. They've got a couple of rails, one on either side. They've got some skylights to add a bit of light down below in the saloon, and they've got space for solar panels. But I took this boat out, obviously, for a little sea trial, and one of its key traits with its lateral stability is stable in the water.
Because of all that beam.
Because, you know, they've used lightweight materials up top, and I'm thinking, look, if ever there was a boat where you could very easily get away with a little flybridge and not impoverish the handling or the performance to any great degree, this is probably it. So you might want to leverage that a bit more. But look, you know, as I say, they've kind of gone for the light-footed thing, both in terms of the aesthetic and the ethos. So it kind of makes sense.
And does it deliver in terms of fuel economy and range? And
yes, it does, is the simple answer to that. I should preface that with the fact that, you know, I kind of feel almost like they're kind of cheating a little bit, you know. This is slightly overstated, but if you want to create a displacement vessel that goes relatively slowly and you're happy for it to be quite sedate in that regard, and you can fit it with small engines, well, of course, you're going to get a bit of extra cruising efficiency. In practice, we got 1 litre per nautical mile at 7 knots, which gives you a range of 1,000 miles.
That's pretty damn good for a 60-foot boat.
Yeah, you can't really argue with that, can you?
No.
And 2 litres per nautical mile at 9 knots or 500 miles. So, I think it tops out at pretty much 14, 15 knots. But it's not even just about the stability or the efficiency. It's more about the refinement, which was really something else. I mean, from that helm, we were seeing at cruising speed readings of around about 52, 53 decibels.
What does that mean in real terms, though? Because you keep quoting this figure.
I know.
I don't think anybody goes, that's 56 decibels, that is.
I know, well, happily, rather than just comparing it to every other test we've ever done and thinking, that looks low, I contextualised it. I went online and I trusted Google, and apparently 52 decibels is equivalent to the kind of hum that a modern refrigerator might make. So that...
Really not very much.
Not very much. It's probably quieter than the air conditioning unit we've got going on here. So you can speak exactly as you would if you're sitting in a silent room. It's that good.
So it really is, from that perspective, it really is quite like a sailing boat. There is almost nothing to disturb you. You're tootling along in perfect serenity, just without all that tippy flappy nonsense you get from masts and sails and ropes and everything else.
Yes, exactly. Well put. I'm glad you said that. You get yourself into trouble instead of me. But yeah, that's pretty much how it is. And that's not accident. Okay, that comes back to the whole concept of the boat. So they're content for it to be slow. Yeah. Right. And topping out at 14 knots, that's slow. So they can use small engines.
Yeah.
So of course those engines are quiet, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
They're also using V-drive. So those engines are relatively far back and small.
Yeah.
So they've got a bulkhead at the forward end of the engine bay that sits maybe 5-6 feet behind the aft bulkhead of the superstructure. So if you're sitting in the saloon, you're divorced entirely from any noise coming up from beneath the floor. And because it's such a small engine bay, because it doesn't have to be larger, you're reducing that potential reverberation you sometimes get, where it kind of amplifies the engine noise and makes them sound, far larger than they actually are. So that is very much in its favour. But also, having walked around the factory, I think I've bored you with this before. I've certainly bored the readers of the magazine before with this.
Come on, hit me with it.
The bulkheads down below, I had a look at the materials they were using, and I was looking at the doors down there thinking, that's thick. And when I went in the factory, you see they use 44 mil boards that comprise a marine ply on either side. And in the centre of that marine ply is a rubberised cork rubber compound, just to damp down the noise. And inside of that is a sound insulating foam in a nice fat sandwich. And they're making the doors from that. They're making the bulkheads from that. And it works supremely well because they also pair that with rubber gaskets around all the door frames so that when you shut the doors, there's no rattling, there's no sound escaping.
And ironically, I guess because the rest of the boat is incredibly quiet, it then becomes a bit of a privacy issue. It's all very well having a quiet boat. If you can hear the couple next door having a chat or anything else.
No, that's very well put, actually. But happily, that's where we come to another little trick that this boat has. I mean, in fairness, it would be very much a charter-friendly boat because in terms of the accommodation, you've got a pair of doubles beneath the saloon deck.
And because of that 20-foot beam, they're decent size,
proper size, You don't feel impoverished in terms of the space you get in there at all. And the light's very good because not only have you got windows in the sides of the superstructure at the side deck level, you've also got hatches, big glass hatches in the side decks themselves, plus whole windows. It's a very
really
bright
nice
and intelligent boat.
Yeah,
and they make a point of saying that every living space in that boat, including the little guest cabins, have a minimum of 3 opening portholes as well. So it's very, very well thought out. But then the bow cabin, that is quite an astonishing place. Tremendous headroom, amazing light all round, great views, and it's separated from those guest cabins beneath the saloon because you've got probably, well, as you know, this is the boat's real selling point for a lot of people, I guess, is a kind of semi-sunken lounge ahead of the helm at the forward end of the saloon that divides the forward cabin from the mid cabins and has double height with huge windows from the screens around the top.
Yeah, so ironically, the actual saloon is quite compact.
Yeah.
But then because you've got that galley and dining area down below, that's all sort of open plan to it, it actually feels like quite a big space. And the luxury of having a double height galley and dining area is completely transformative, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I've mentioned this before for various other podcasts. I do get a bit green. I get a bit of seasickness or just I move edge that way if I'm forced to go downstairs and make a cup of tea. Not this galley. I mean, there's light everywhere, loads of air. good views, loads
And
of space.
ventilation is often ignored and underrated. I think they think, oh, well, we'll do it with air conditioning.
Yeah.
It's not the same, is
It's
it?
not
There's
the same
nothing like,
at all.
it dries your eyes out, it dries your throat out, air conditioning. If you've got natural ventilation, a bit of a sea breeze, can open up the boat, it's just a much nicer atmosphere than a sort of artificial air conditioned one.
It really is. You got windows on both sides of the superstructure for exactly that, and to assist the skipper in a bit of seamanship. You incidentally, you do have a second helm back in the cockpit as well, and the doors open good and wide at the aft end of that superstructure. Plus, you got fold up panels that kind of join the deck head above it, so you can integrate the big aft cockpit with, as you suggest, that slightly mean internal saloon. All it really has is a little port dinette, a very small one.
And it's a slightly weird sort of settee, isn't it? It's sort of not quite. It's almost a chaise longue type.
It is. It's so incredibly deep.
I didn't quite get that.
Well, the idea is that you can grab that backrest, which is weighted. You can shift it halfway forward on the cushion. Then you can sit there as you would regularly with a bit of backrest and look across to the TV, which is in the cabinet on the other side.
But then all the space behind you is sort of lost.
Redundant. Yeah. I didn't quite get that either, if I'm absolutely honest. But what I did enjoy is the fact that when you're sitting there in a chaise longue sort of style with your feet up and your arm on the threshold, between the internal saloon and the external cockpit, you feel very much like part of that external cockpit. And in doing so, you forget you're in quite a pokey space, actually, because it is the place that takes a hit for everything else that works on this boat, isn't it?
So bottom line, would you, wouldn't you?
You're so black and white. Why do you have to ask me these questions?
At some point, you've got to make that choice. Is it worth the money? Would you buy that, or would you buy, or would you go the full hog and get a catamaran? Catamaran is displacement. You have all that beam, all that space.
I'm going to relate this to our viewers and our readers and say, if you don't mind travelling slow and you don't object to the sailing boat looks and you don't object to the small saloon, it's brilliant.
So it does everything it's meant to do. It works brilliantly. Yeah. It's just a personal choice of whether you particularly like that style of boat.
Yeah, exactly that. But it is very versatile too. Yeah. As I say, it's charter friendly, because if you want to split that forward cabin into two, you can make it a 4-cabin boat. You can also convert the dinette in that lower lounge, that intermediary lounge. So that's another 2 berths. You can convert that slightly strange chaise longue dinette in the saloon. That's another 2 berths. And if you stick canvases over the arse end of the boat, you can convert those 2 L-shaped dinettes in the cockpit for another. How many of us sleep? About 460 people if you want to. So look, I mean, it really does work.
And to be fair, there's a lot of sailors out there who get to a certain age and stage in life and decide, I really haven't got the strength or the agility or whatever it is to have all the sails and ropes and everything else. But I'm very comfortable going that speed. I like the aesthetic of a sailing boat. Feels more familiar to them, looks more familiar to them. Yeah. Just doesn't have a mast, but does everything it does with a very efficient pair of engines.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to say yes to whether I'd have one. I would, because I remember, now you mentioned it, being so excited by what I was seeing and what I was enjoying that I wasn't really thinking about these little negatives that I've mentioned. And I was actually so excited I didn't even look into the crew cabin, which apparently is down in the V of the bow. In that tapered
You need
section.
a crew cabin on that boat, do you?
No, but if your kids have been naughty, or if you just need somewhere to stick your fenders or your lines or whatever's messing up your life, you just want to get it out of your head.
And to be fair, always worth having, because when it comes to selling on, you never know, there might be a requirement on the next buyer. So it's usually worth, if there is a crew cabin option, it's worth ticking it, because it'll be a more sellable boat when the time does come. Yeah,
and I think it is quite possible that this Omikron OT60, it feels like a bit of a leap to say yes, because it's very different, but I think it's on the kind of crest of market trends towards stability, towards efficiency, towards volume, towards practicality, versatility, towards charter friendliness. It's all there. So I would expect
Category A as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that's right.
RCD category A, so really capable offshore sea boat.
Yeah. So we've talked ourselves well into this, Hugo, haven't we?
Well, definitely one to put on the list and check out, because it's, if nothing else, it's a really interesting idea, and it may or may not catch on. Yeah. But well worth a look. Yeah, and either way, they're great guys. They build a tremendously high quality boat, and there's a lot of merit in it. You'll enjoy your day out. Good stuff.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of our boat chat. So we're going to move on to our product, and our product for this week is paddleboards.
Yeah, or SUPs, as a lot of people.
Yeah, supboards.
Supboards. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can still get rigid fiberglass ones, can't you? But pretty much everyone's into the inflatable stuff now.
Yeah, I think they're just that much easier. They tend to be more stable. They're more convenient because you can roll them up and stick them in the back of your car or in the lazarette of your boat or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they're a bit more forgiving if, or should I say, perhaps when you fall over.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they're just cool bits of kit, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's an easy way to get yourself on the water, an affordable way.
Absolutely, whether you have a boat or not. But
yeah.
I rarely see a boat these days without a paddleboard on it of some kind, because that's the thing about boats, you know, big as it is, when you get to a lovely anchorage, you actually want something to do. And particularly if you've got kids on board, you want to keep the restless blighters as far away from you as possible. If you can send them off on a paddleboard, and they might come back or they might not, but, you know, it gets them out of the off the boat for a little bit.
It does, yeah. Yeah, natural selection. I'm a big fan.
But what is the appeal of them? Because I think not everybody gets the whole idea, because you don't tend to go terribly far in them.
No, you don't. So, look, I mean, you can get a really decent stand-up paddleboard for around about 300 quid now, can't you?
Absolutely.
That's the bottom end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right up to sort of 700-800 quid for a posh one. And the appeal for me when I bought mine was very simple. I want to be out on the water. I can't always borrow other people's boats. I haven't got a lot of money. But even if I did, even if I was a super yacht owner, which is never going to happen, even if I was, I would still want to be out in that tender. I want to be close to the water. I want to feel the elements. And a paddleboard is a fantastic way of doing that.
And you really do feel like you're sort of part of nature. And I think there's something quite special. If you go in and if the water's really still, really clear, and you're standing on that board, you have a sort of view down, you know, you're looking down all the time. You're making no noise at all, really. You can just paddle very gently, very quietly. You can see all the fishes swimming around underneath you. And it's a really lovely experience. And it's sort of gentle and calming. And I mean, that's why people end up doing things like yoga on it. I never quite understood that.
Well, you need to be better than me on a sup board to do yoga on it. I can't move a muscle from my central stance. Otherwise, I know I'm going overboard.
Yeah, but the first time you get on it, you do think, this is ridiculous. I'm never going to get a hang on this. But actually, the key to it, I think, is actually getting going and moving, because the paddle is what provides a lot of the stability, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
If you keep moving, you can start to get the feel of it and the balance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to steer clear of delivering any technical advice in terms of how to use a paddleboard, because I know I'm rubbish at it. But
anybody can have a go, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
the point is,
a
kid can have a go, an old person can have a go.
Yeah. And the fact is, even though they're called stand-up paddleboards, it's not the way you start. Until you build your confidence, you're on your knees. You can even sit your backside down and use a two-ended paddle like a kayak.
Yeah, or often you can actually buy a seat that'll strap onto it. Yeah, and you can actually use it as a kayak.
That's
you
exactly
also get a bit of a wet bum, but you know, hopefully it's nice enough conditions not to mind about that.
And usually like that, you know, almost nothing could be more stable. You know, it's pretty good.
And that's another key thing, I think, when you are looking to buy one, don't sort of skimp on for things like your weight. You know, it's really crucial that you get a paddleboard that is big enough, is stable enough. Don't pretend you're a genius. Go for the beginner level, or at very best intermediate. And crucially, inflate it properly. I always see this. You see people struggling with their paddleboards. They pump them up. They think that'll do. It feels like it's rigid enough. Yeah. And then they stand on a thing and it sort of bends in the middle. You think that's just
not it. Well, I've got a Bluefin Cruise, and that came with, I think it's like 10.5 foot or so. So it's a decent size. So it is.
That's about standard, 10 foot 6, 10 foot 8.
And that came with a pump with a little green zone, and then the rest is red zone. Until you've got that needle in the green zone pumping it up, don't go anywhere.
No, right? You've got to go all the way. Yeah. And it does take some effort. You really got to pump them up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of 15 to 20 PSI minimum.
Yeah. Once you get to like 3.5 PSI, you're thinking, I'm actually dying here. Oh my God.
Well, that is the danger. You get more exercise from actually pumping the thing up than... But it makes such a difference. If you get them really taut, really well inflated, they then actually become remarkably rigid and stable.
They do.
Fins, another important thing. A lot of people, I've lost the fin, I can't be bothered to put that in. You must put the fin in.
You must
wiggle it around like a bicycle or a unicycle.
Yeah, well, my Bluefin board, I mean, that it's one of the older ones, so it had 3 fins. And I thought this would be great because it will give me a little bit more resistance to the wind. You know, I won't drift like a pond skater hopelessly into danger. But I did. It's exactly what I did. Yeah. Because I don't weigh a lot. And I'm not a especially powerful sort of man. And I was way, way too ambitious with some of the things I was trying to do. I went to visit a mate who had kayaks in Woodbridge in Suffolk on the River Deben, and we tried to go all the way through to Old Lowestoft, which is, as the crow flies, that's about 15 miles. But when yeah, I know. There and back in a day, by the way. That was the plan, and we thought we'd go with the tide. But my God, I was just dying. And then, I'm going to blame nature rather than my calculations. The tide turned a shade early. Yeah, I know. And so I'm absolutely, after, maybe 4 hours of paddling, maybe 5, I'm absolutely killing myself to stay still while the kayaks disappear off into the distance. We're only like 400 yards from Old Lowestoft.
Yeah.
I think, oh my God. And one of the kayaks had to come back and rescue me. So
you've got the wrong idea about it. Paddleboards are not actually for going to places. They're just for having a nice paddle around the boat in a bay. Yeah. And even then, be careful, because if you're going paddling downwind, you go quite a long way quite quickly. Then you turn around and try and paddle into it, and you basically become an enormous sail.
You do. And, I think the protocol suggests that you get down low. Obviously, it makes sense, onto your knees or even onto your belly, and just, try to use your feet, your arms, whatever you can, But it did put me in mind of the fact that rather than, drifting off into danger on a bit of driftwood like a shipwreck victim, I should either get training, which you can do now with the RYA, or I should get an electric one. And you know what my feelings on a lot of these things, it kind of spoils I believed it would spoil the whole point, the whole serenity of the thing, the loveliness of it, the being in touch with nature thing, having an electric motor. But I've tried a Sipper electric paddleboard. It's about, between 1,500 and 3 grand. So it's, I mean, it's sort of 3, 4, 5 times what you pay for a standard one, what I pay for mine. But not only does that give you the extra security to get out of that situation if I hadn't been in company, it also enables you to go and cruise and see stuff that you wouldn't otherwise.
Real
that's
distance.
Right. And use it as a proper toy. Yeah. And because it's got a clever little motor, it will inflate itself. Which makes a hell of a difference.
I have to admit, I invested in a little electric pump, a Bravo turbo electric pump. And the joy of that is you just set the pressure you want it to get to and let it get on with it.
It's brilliant.
And and the other really clever thing I've started to see, you've probably seen this too, a number of boats are now actually installing inflator pumps as part of the boat fit out. I think it's called a Scanstrut Atmos, where you actually have the pump installed on the boat. You can pump your tenders up, you can pump your SUPs. Increasingly, people are now having sort of inflatable e-foil boards and all kinds of things. And it's so handy having that in the cockpit rather than having to rummage around and
it is. And one of the very best things about that, not only is it great for your SUP board, it's great for your tender, and it also means that once you've finished your day on the water, you don't have to bodily roll all over the bloody thing to get the last vestiges of air out like somebody with mental health difficulties. You can actually just deflate, hit the deflate button and out comes all the air.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So really worth getting that. But you've got a paddleboard yourself, haven't you?
I have. I have one by a company called Two Bare Feet. I did look them up the other day and I'm not sure they're still making them, but there are plenty of good manufacturers. As you say, everything from kind of 300 quid upward. Decathlon sell a lot. They do a brand called Itty Wit. I think they also sell other brands. There's a local company to me called Sandbank Style that sell a really nice paddleboard for
they're quite affordable, aren't they?
Yeah, they're sort of 300 quid, 350 or so. But actually, even, the top end, Red always used to be the absolute sort of pinnacle. They were sort of, 4 figures plus.
Yeah.
But I looked online the other day and their sort of best-selling standard model is now about 600 quid. So there's not that sort of yawning gulf that there used to be between really top-end one and super affordable but not very good. They've now converged a little bit. You can get a top of the rate, a really good brand like Red for about 600 quid. Or you can, some of the sort of more affordable ones have now upped their quality and now they're really good for sort of 300-400 quid.
Yeah, and our old mates in Glasgow, Lomo, who were established, about 20 years ago with the intention of making water sports gear very affordable. And they did exactly that, so good for them. They've got some paddleboards now, 10-foot 6-inch board for 325 quid.
And it's not just the board, though, I reckon. That it's the whole package that you get a lot of the time. There's a massive difference in terms of how good the accessories are. Like you can get carbon fiber paddles, which I have invested in, and I've got to say that's a really lovely thing because it's just so light and so stiff.
It is soul destroying to see your paddle flex as you put all your effort into it.
The pump makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
You know, some manual pumps are much easier to use and much more sort of robust.
Yeah.
And a lot of them now have sort of 2 gears effectively. So my pump, it's not a brilliant one, but it's decent enough. And in one, you put it on the sort of first gear, and that is using both the up pump and the down pump to inflate it.
Yeah, it's good.
But then it's really hard work when it gets tighter. So you then sort of flick it to the second gear, and then you're just pumping on the downward stroke. So yeah, it's worth looking beyond just what you're getting in terms of the board. You want to look at the package, the paddle, the pump. Some bags are much better than others.
Yeah,
some have,
and it's got to be easy to carry because if it isn't, you won't use it.
Yeah, a lot of them have wheels now in the actual case. So yeah, don't just look at the board and the brand. Look at the whole package and see what you get as part of that.
Well, that's an important point, isn't it? Which I'll get back to in a sec. But I just want to point out that if you have even a relatively big family, I mean, there are paddleboards now, 15-footers. It sounds like an incremental kind of increase over a 10-foot-6, but these things are massive and they got some proper buoyancy. So you can. Some of these will carry 6 people. You know, they are colossal, proper family boards. These things.
But they actually stay upright with 6 people on them?
It depends on the people. Not my kids, I wouldn't have thought. But
I mean, have you ever tried to go on a normal paddleboard with 2 people?
Yeah, I've taken my boys out, one in front and one behind, but I make them sit themselves down because they just find it funny to tip me
2
off.
people standing up. Yeah. It's just impossible.
But these big family footer 15-footer things, they look virtually impossible to capsize.
I don't imagine you get anywhere on them though, would you?
No, I don't know. I'd love
6
to
people.
try one. We should test one.
Do it.
But we ought to get back to what you're talking about, which is the accessories, because, you know, my little River Deben excursion, I mean, I did get back all the way, by the way, to Woodbridge later that day.
Which is why you're still with us.
4.5
That would
days.
be disappointing.
It was pretty savage. And I did understand the dangers there. So you need to remember your leashes. You know, so if you go over, you're still attached to your board, you've still got your paddle. You need your dry bags, you need your comms gear. You need to take a mate to be safe, and you need to get involved in a proper course like the one that the R8 provides.
The other thing I've seen a bit and tested a few of them myself are these little flotation devices. So you don't necessarily want to wear a full life jacket because if you the chances are you are going to fall off. You don't want that blowing up and then it's game over for the day. And equally, some of those more sort of personal rather than the full life jacket, the PFDs that you have to wear, but they're quite bulky.
They are.
But you can get these little ones that you wear sort of around your waist in like a bum bag, effectively. But if you do need the extra flotation, if you do find yourself struggling, you can inflate that, strap it around you, and then you've got it with you if you need it.
That makes loads of sense because those PFDs you're talking about, I mean, when you're working hard physically, you sweat inside those, don't you?
And they just get very hot because they're a bit bulky there. And, you're not in the water all the time like you would be if you're dinghy sailing or windsurfing or water skiing or whatever.
That's right.
So it's really handy to have something that you've got with you that you can use if you need it, but isn't sort of weighing you down when you're not.
Exactly that. And then one other thing to mention, if you don't have the luxury of buying yourself a paddleboard with a little electric motor, is if you're going to go out, you've got to go out in the right conditions. It sounds simple, but honestly, you've got to wait for those onshore breezes. So if you lose your paddle, if you start cramping up or you're just knackered, you're going to drift onto the beach. You're not going to drift out to sea because you see this with inflatables of all kind every year. And the
number of shout outs.
Yeah.
No, fair point.
But brilliant kit these days and well worth investing in.
Really good fun, well worth having, not expensive and relatively compact because they mostly roll up and you can stuff in a lazarette or a locker. Well worth having, highly recommend.
Fantastic stuff. So next up comes our issue of the week. All set for your argument, I see, Hugo.
Well, people have strong opinions about it, don't they?
About it? What is it? It's inboard versus
outboard.
Outboard
engines.
Now, look, we all know, Hugo knows, the camera crew knows, everybody knows that the world and his dog loves an outboard engine these days.
They do now. There's been an absolute massive explosion in them. And it's only really they've obviously been around for years, but they only really started taking off probably sort of about the turn of the century, 2000, 2005. Things really started to take off. And then, the advent of ribs, they're nearly all outboard powered. and then the likes of Axopars and Saxdors, and they suddenly became the thing.
Did, but we saw a marked shift. First of all, I don't know which came first, but first of all, there was a little sort of power war, wasn't there, between the main brands? Everyone was going, oh, you do a 200 horsepower, well, I'm going to do a 250, there's a 300, there's a 350, how about the 400? SEMA 600, it all just kicked off, didn't it? We saw the XTOs from Yamaha designed to have loads of torque, massive props, so they could shift big cruisers. Now, these were boats that you'd never even consider an outboard for in the past, weren't they?
No, I agree. And yeah, it used to always just be a thing for small sports boats, ribs and the like. And then suddenly, due to the power and size of these engines, and there was a little bit of showmanship going on, the number on the back, and not just the number on the back, it's how many of them you've got on the back. And you're right, Nina, now we're seeing 60, 70-foot boats with, quad rigs or even, 6 on occasions. And I couldn't believe it when Mercury came out with that V12 600 horsepower outboard engine. I mean, that just seemed absolutely mind-blowing at the time.
It's gorgeous though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
It's just a fantastic piece of engineering.
Isn't it just? I know.
How you can fit all that into an outboard engine.
I know. And it doesn't even feel like a kind of self-indulgent hooligans piece of work, does it? It feels
it's a lovely
fine and... I was going to say efficient then. It feels efficient. It doesn't feel efficient. It feels...
Well, for a 600 horsepower V12 outboard, it's relatively efficient for what it is because you've got that 2-speed ratio.
Yeah, so it's quite exciting that. It always ruins my performance figures when you're just going up the rev range, and then it shifts and everything goes wrong.
But let's get back to, let's the majority of people, we're talking about inboard, outboard on the kind of 20 to 35-ish foot type of boat, maybe 40 foot, which is largely, certainly in the European market, the core of it, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you what gets on my nerves a little bit.
Go on in.
The types of cruiser at a smaller end we're talking about, where they started fitting outboards to them. Well, that's great. If people want outboards, you want to sell boats, if you've got to do that, okay? But don't just do that. Don't take a boat that was built for inboard propulsion, strip out those big heavy units, stick a ton of outboards up high and aft on the transom, and then what about the vacated space? Going to do anything with that? No, just going to leave a massive hole in the bottom of the boat. So when you open it up, all you're doing is going down into the stringers, messing around with oily water, and you even see the little mounts for the filters and stuff still in there. Do something with it. It's a massive hole. You could just line it for storage. You could even potentially use this as some sort of clever reinterpretation of an optional aft cabin, couldn't you?
That's what Windy have done. And we've spoken about that in a previous podcast.
Exactly that.
You can actually use that space. But
I think people don't. People don't.
A lot of
people are lazy.
There are not that many boats that have been converted from inboard to outboard. There's 1 or 2 people who've done it because they think they need to appeal to the US market.
Exactly.
And, fair play to them. But I think we should actually talk about the pros and cons of a boat that could viably have both.
All right. In a second, because I haven't quite finished. You stick the outboards on instead of the inboards. Well, are you planning to rearrange the weight distribution in any way to compensate for that extra weight aft? No, doesn't really happen. So it drives like a bit of a dog. Are you going to increase the fuel capacity because you've gone from a boat that runs in a relatively frugal fashion to one that drinks the fuel for fun? No, you're happy with a 75-mile range because that's brilliant. You've got outboards on the back. It winds me up a bit. You can't just leap onto the outboard propulsion bandwagon and think that whacking outboards on any old boat will do the job. It won't. So now I've finished. I feel a bit better.
Right. Have you got that out of your system?
Yeah,
Can we now have a proper debate about a boat that actually could have either?
Yes.
So pros for having an outboard. And I've chosen an outboard engine, and I deliberately chose a boat that could have one because, well, first up, when I was buying it, and it was back in sort of 2005, the tech on outboards was way, way better than it was on inboards at the time. There's a whole choice of different manufacturers. You're not just, basically, if you want a petrol inboard engine, you've only really got Volvo and Mercury to choose from. And both of them basically pretty damn similar in terms of the actual base engine. Whereas here, there was Honda, there was Suzuki, there's Yamaha, there's Mercury, there was Evinrude at the time. All of them much more modern tech than was actually going on with the engine itself compared to an inboard.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that it lifts out of the water completely. So when it's sitting on its mooring, as mine does, it just sits on a swing mooring. So you've got nothing sitting in the water, corroding away, fizzing away. You've got no through hull fittings, so there's no chance of any failure of a seal or a gasket or a gaiter or anything. So it's not going to sink when you're not away. There's nothing rusting away that's sitting in the water. Much shallower draft. I keep my boat in Poole Harbour, gets pretty shallow around there. So if it is getting a bit squeaky, you can just lift up the engine a bit and keep it out of the water. Maintenance, much easier. If it come to it, you can take the whole outboard engine off and replace it, but far easier to get to and check things. You haven't got to permanently change seals and gaskets and everything else, which you have to do fairly regularly if you've got a stern drive. So on all those levels, it just makes a lot of sense. And certainly from a sort of pragmatic point of view, I felt it was a no-brainer.
Well, here's the counter argument, because all that is valid and all that is true. So it's quite natural that people would want outboards for those reasons. But all other things being equal, we're looking at extra range, aren't we, with inboard diesels?
Well, only if it's diesels. I think the debate is we've moved on from petrols and diesels. We're just talking petrols, inboard or out.
Even if we leave the range issue out of it, you're looking at better handling. You know that as well as I do. For the most part, if you're looking, if we're looking at the same platform available with outboards or inboards, just the weight being deep, the weight being central, the weight being further forward,
I will
makes a big difference.
Concede on that front, and I have to say, every now and then you get in an inboard powered sports boat like something like a Cormate 27 or 28, and the weight is low and it's central and the little bits further forward, and it does handle absolutely beautifully.
Yeah.
Whereas on outboard, you've got all the engine up in the air above the waterline, and the bigger it is and the heavier it is, and it's right out the back as well, rather than a bit more towards the centre of the boat. So I will concede to you, they're not quite as good to drive.
No. And again, all things being equal, you tend to give yourself a better chance of a flatter, low-speed plane without having to dip your tabs and do everything else that you have to do.
Yeah.
And you have tabs for a reason. You can use them for that. But again, it's just about a more natural weight distribution for an efficient plane and for a proper angle of attack for your hull, giving it the best chance. And this is probably going to resonate more with people than the stuff we've been talking about so far, there's the aft end of the boat, right? You just have more space. There's more potential for you to enjoy the back end of your boat if it isn't clogged up with outboard engines.
Yes, but then that does mean you're losing space further forward inside the boat.
Yes.
So I think that's probably a 50-50 one. Yes, I agree, not always a prettier sight to have a couple of big outboards and you lose that lovely open sort of aft bathing platform.
Yeah, and on a lot of boats lose the capacity to carry a little tender too, don't you?
True, because you can't. Yeah, okay. I don't. But then you have got a whole load of space in front of it, which is cockpit space, which I would argue is probably more important than a cupboard at the back or somewhere to put a.
Well, do you? I mean, I just went out on the Rustler 41 in Cornwall. Last week, end of last week, had a great time. That had a couple of inboard engines. They're going to offer an outboard option as well because they want to succeed in America. Who wouldn't? But in order to do that, you got to take a lovely looking boat and savagely undermine those lines. You've also got to eradicate a big bit of the swim platform, chop the aft bench in half so you can make a bit of space to get in and out. It just utterly changes things up. And I struggle to see the merits of that. And if I talk about another boat that I particularly enjoy, I know you do too, the new Aquador 400 hardtop.
Okay. Yeah.
Really fantastic boat. Makes loads of good use of the available volume it has. But at the back end, it has a wonderful, intimate little aft-facing lounge.
Yeah.
Where you can look aft over the water, out at your wake or anchor. You just sit there and look down at the water, have a nice glass of wine. You want outboard engines, that's just gone. You cannot have it. It's out of there.
No, clearly the engines are in the way at that point. And I will concede there are some boats, and funnily enough, well, we're on a Fairline at the moment, and right opposite me here, I can see a very lovely looking Fairline or F-Line 33.
Yeah.
And that boat with a pair of inboard V8 petrols on stern drives is an absolutely sensational thing. It goes brilliantly. Yeah. They also sound rather good. There's nothing quite like the sound of a big capacity V8 inboard engine. You know, Mercury do quite a good job with their outboards. They do sound pretty good in a sort of slightly snorty kind of way. Yeah. They have that sort of little cheat. I love that. If you've had a play with that little sort of butterfly valve switch where you can make them extra noisy.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that is nice.
But it still doesn't sound as good as an inboard V8 with a proper pair of pipes on it.
And now we're talking of V8s. If you want that 400 HT with a pair of Mercury V8 300s, as I say, you can have it. You've got to get rid of that lovely aft end. But, you know, not only does it ruin your kind of day spaces at the aft end, you also achieve 30% fuel savings with a pair of D4 320s, which from a modest size of tank, 700 litres, and as I say, they never seem to increase the tank for outboards, gives you 200 miles, which is excellent.
But that's more about the fact that it's diesel and inboard versus outboard.
It is,
it's not really apples with apples. And you can get a powerful diesel outboard these days.
Can you? Would you fit one to your boat?
Well, I would if somebody paid for it, because they are super expensive. But
Look,
I do like
diesel
the
outboards. Yeah, we all like the principle. 20 years ago when they first showed them to us at boat shows, didn't we?
Yeah, it took a little bit of time to get there, but I like that. I admire the fact that Cox have built a 300 horsepower diesel outboard engine designed from the ground up to be a proper diesel outboard engine rather than trying to pull something out of a car and marinize it and stick various bits and pieces on it to try and make it work as an outboard engine. I like the fact that they've designed it from the ground up and built a true bespoke diesel outboard, but it is all the money. It's kind of 2-3 times the price of a petrol one, and that's pretty hard to justify.
You know, while we're talking about the petrol power plant there, I mentioned to you before, I didn't know which Glastron it was. Remember, I said one of the best driving experiences I've ever had in my life in any boat was in a Glastron. And I couldn't remember which one it was because it doesn't sound like a very exotic boat. I know, mainstream American builder. It was a GT229, so relatively small,
powered by
cuddy sports cruiser, just a 300 horsepower Mercury inboard on stern drive. And it's the only time in my life as a professional journalist I've forgotten to gather any fuel figures, any performance figures, because I was having.
I'm glad you weren't working for me at the point.
No, I know. I went back in, big smile on my face. I hadn't actually done my job. I just had an amazing time. The Caesar kicked right off. It was out in the Med where the sun bakes the land a little and the winds kick off. And there are all sorts of bigger boats from that press trip who were sort of messing around with the troughs because you just couldn't get up and stay up. And we were skimming across those crests. It was just glorious. I looked like an absolute hero. And it was completely the boat.
In your mind. Everybody else was thinking, what is that lunatic doing?
They all doing like 14 knots and smashing themselves to bits in the troughs. So we were scooting along at 45 knots on the peaks, just thinking this is fabulous.
That's, you've been suckered in by the whole journalistic thing, because that's not your boat. That's not something you're paying for. You're having to do the servicing on. You're having to pay the fuel bills.
True.
So when it comes to it, when you actually have to sign the check, when I was deciding what to buy, I thought, no, I'm going to go outboard because I've had outboards before, I've had inboards before, and when it comes to the stuff that really matters, when you're writing the check, it was outboard for me every time at that size.
Yeah, sounds like we're never going to agree on this, doesn't it?
Oh, I don't think so, but I think that's allowed. And I will give in to you on the fact that if you're just for pure driving pleasure, if you get a really sweet inboard installation, it is a thing of loveliness. But in the round, for me, for a small sports boat, anywhere in the kind of 18 to probably about 30 foot category, I would go outboard.
And for range and for looks and for efficiency. It's all there.
If I was buying a diesel,
for handling.
If I was buying a diesel boat, I would get an inboard.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, diesel boat of 30 foot plus. But anyway, I think we've probably made our points. We don't want to drag it out.
So shall we shut up now and invite our listeners and viewers to actually make a comment or two themselves, because I'm certain you guys have your preferences. And as I say, if the market trends are anything to go by, I'm going to be on the losing side here with my favouritism for inboards. But please do leave your comments. Tell us why you favour, what you favour. Please hit like and join us again for podcast 8 next week.
Will do. Look forward to it.
Cheers.